Jessica Crow, and I'm the founder of Apogee and the host of Change Leader Insights, which is a podcast that is all about change, obviously, the mindset, the skills that leaders need to really help prepare people, to help inspire people, to move them through organizational change. And I'm really excited because I have Edwina Pike here with me today. Edwina is a disruptor of organizational behavior change. Ed and her team are on a mission to change the way you think about change, to work smarter, not harder. And I have been following her on LinkedIn for quite some time. She's prolific with the information and wisdom that she's sharing. So if you haven't been on LinkedIn, check out her work, check out her website, which we'll share at the end of this conversation. But Edwina, I'm so happy to have you here today. Tell us a little bit more. The bio I gave was very brief, but tell us who you are, how you got to where you are today, and then we'll dive into our topic.
So I am what would I call myself? I am a change agent. I'm also a behavioralist. So I specialize in human behavior, and our practices specialize in human behavior. Not so much how do I lose 20 kilos, but more like how do I hack an organization's behavior. What we do is quite niche. It's quite unusual. There's not very many people doing what we do, which means we get invited into the sit at the seat of quite a lot of high table to fix things. But there's also another side of what we do, which is this thing called irrational change, which is driven again by the insight that humans, when we're cognitively overloaded, which let's be honest is all of the time, we tend not to be very rational in our thinking. We're very irrational. So we don't assume that any humans are going to take a rational approach to any change that you try and do. We take an opinion that they're going to be very, very irrational. And actually that irrationality is quite predictable. And we believe you can get ahead of that. So yeah, we specialize in a very niche area, but it's very powerful. And it's one that if you're a change agent or a change leader, you're probably going to want to know about. And you're probably going to want to use it, because then you can really work smarter, not harder.
Yeah, that's what I love about the work that you do and the information that you're sharing, because you really are getting into that neuroscience, behavior change, and trying to explore that. And I think the name of your firm is it Irrational Change, or is that the Irrational Change? And then you also have another group that you oversee and support. What is that called?
So we have two sides to our business. On one side, we have like a grown-up advisory firm called Pike Squared. And myself, my other half, yes, we are married. Yes, we are founders. Yes, we run the business together. Yes, we are still best friends.
That's impressive.
I know, it is amazing because he's an ex-engineer. His knowledge of behavior is different to mine. He hangs out in the PhD. I'm more of an absolute applied behavioralist, a pragmatist. But Pike Square is where we show up with our big corporate clients. That's that sort of grown up. We go do our real big assignments where we basically go find out what's going wrong and find ways around it. On the other side of what we do is irrational change. And that, I'll be honest, is my passion project. So I've been around the world changing behavior now, probably since my early 20s, when I was a head of IT, what these days you call a CIO. And I realized that you can't make a change unless the people want to change. And any crisp IT idea I had was never going to go anywhere unless we could make or help people want to do things differently.
Yeah, that's absolutely right.
Yeah, so on the irrational change, the part of the passion there is about, if you've ever been around the world of change, you'll know that a lot of change agents get abused for what they're doing. And by abuse, I really mean they get treated very badly. They don't get listened to. They don't get brought in early enough. There's a whole load of stuff that goes on. And they take on a lot of the emotions of what's happening around them. So what we're doing at Irrational Change is very much just trying to raise the capability and the confidence of change agents so they can stop things happening faster, and they can basically come up with some better strategies for how to fix it too. So that's our absolute passion project. And that's why we give generously. We run webinars, we post on LinkedIn, we give generously through Irrational Change to try and just raise the skill of change agents everywhere.
Which is so wonderful. And you provide so much data and information to help build the confidence in the conversations that change agents are having. Because I agree with you. I think part of that is due to many leaders and organizations not really understanding change management, how to move people through that process by taking a look at human behavior and how the brain works. And that's what we are going to talk a little bit about today, is just maybe the behavioral science behind change and toxic cultures in particular. And I think that could also contribute to, and I think for any worker, having a poor experience. But let's start to dive into that. So you've got a wealth of information out there, but let's start with just, how do you, when you think about toxic cultures and psychological safety, why is this so important for leaders to be thinking about today?
So the first thing to think about is the impact that either a lack of psychological safety or what you might call a toxic culture has on your organization. So one of your most flexible, agile, creative sources of competitive advantage is your people. And when you remove safety, psychological safety or other safeties, when you create something you might call a toxic culture, it's a strategic own goal. It's something you cause yourself. We have some, one of them is leaders get the outcomes they deserve. Now, this really is a leadership issue. And I don't want to just say that we respond to our bosses. We respond to how our leaders lead our organization.
Right.
And all too often, it can be very easy to criticize leaders. It's an easy, cheap shot to make.
Yeah.
But if you look at leaders generally, they never get to go to leadership school. And the leadership schools they do get to go to are often based in academia, which is very, very far removed from reality. And all leaders really have to work on is the role models that are around them. And when you look at the role models around them, they're not very great.
Right.
Not a change agent. They've been trained by every team that's gone before you. They're not great. In fact, the biggest crisis in our organizations right now, and it then flows through. So the effect you're seeing of the crisis is toxic culture. It is psychological safety. But the actual cause, the thing you want to fix is actually leaders. And when I say leaders, as again, remember, leaders are humans first and leaders second. It's leadership we need to fix because leaders don't know how to lead and their role models are just very poor. I just want to pick up something else as well, which is again, and when I talk about sciences, I'm not just talking about behavioral science as in cognitive biases or psychology or even neuroscience. We go broader than that because when you're looking at organizations and the dynamic in organizations, you have to start looking into social sciences and anthropology. You look at child development. There's a whole range of stuff that's going on to try and demystify why this stuff happens. How can we mitigate it? What can we do about it? And one of the most dangerous things about any culture is the minute it gets named as being toxic. Because our brains shortcut, and our brain shortcut to toxic being very bad. Imagine the cartoons you saw as a child that had like nuclear hazard signs on them that things were toxic, it was very, very bad. So you immediately have this baggage that comes forward to say this is very bad. So as an organization, if people are talking about your culture as a toxic culture, you're already in pretty bad place because it's hard to come back from something that has been with such a strong name. That's the first one. It's a very, very powerful thing.
I was say if you were going to keep going, I didn't want to interrupt. Okay, good. Well, so yes, I think you're hitting the nail on the head in two areas. One, that most people who step into leadership roles do not have that training or awareness. They're modeling the behaviors that were modeled to them. And I think that is part of the issue. I fully see that in my work. I saw that when I was on the industry side and as a consultant. And I agree too, that once you name it, it is probably going to be a long road to come back from that. But, as you were saying that, it made me think, I would imagine that you've had clients where you've told them, or you've delicately, I'm sure, that they have challenges with their culture. And that's maybe the starting point. How do you come back from something like that, recognizing a toxic culture, a lack of psychological safety has a direct impact on organizational outcomes and performance and the likelihood that change is going to stick and even work in the first place? What do you do?
It really does. I mean, one of the first things we do is hold up the mirror. Now, it's much, much easier as an external party than it is when you're in. Because when you're internal, your own safety is often a threat. And you've built the level of trust that you can have some honest conversations. So we have an advantage when you're external because you can have some of those tough conversations. Conversation often start with us being brought in to provide some resilience training. And it's a very common thing. Could you please come and teach our people how to be more resilient? And we always entertain the conversation, knowing that we're going to say no. And why would we not do resilience training? Because resilience training is good for everyone, isn't it? Yes. Well, the conversation we have instead is, why do your people need resilience training?
Right.
As if you're creating an environment that's causing your people to be not resilient because of the environment you're creating, that's your choice. Wouldn't it be a better idea to fix the environment first rather than just try and put the elastoplast over and provide resilience training? So that's the conversation we get to. Now, over the years, we've got very, very, very skilled at having conversations. And we go into things knowing that leaders get the outcomes they deserve, but they often can't see it. They blame their teams. They project failure on their teams, who are poor team members, than on themselves.
Yeah.
Most effective ways we found of doing this is, remember that leaders are humans first. They're humans first, leaders second. So we treat our leaders as humans. We're quite human towards them. And we often teach them about leadership, but we teach it in a sort of indirect way. And we allow them to judge the leaders around them a little bit as well. But by doing, they start to see the behaviors that they don't like in their own leaders and then recognize them in themselves. We have some amazing techniques we use, some little questions that we ask that if you look at them on paper, they look so easy to answer, yet they drive such a really in-depth, twisting, almost soul-searching conversation that follows up. But that's that ability to hold the mirror up. Now, a few tricks we use going into that, 'cause it's a tough conversation to have.
Right.
First one is, we always go in as an equal. So irrespective of wherever you think you are in the hierarchy, even if you are technically levels and junior levels below, above, whatever, always go into every conversation as a psychological equal. Now, the reason why you do that is humans adjust to each other, and that gives you the ability to have an equal to equal conversation with them, because they will adjust to you. Very, very few people feel the need to dominate the conversation and you. So immediately in a better position. Second one is, we take the time to invest to build some trust. So we show that we are there for your success as a leader. You need to do this, because if you think I'm a threat, you're not going to listen to me.
Oh, right.
Bring the next consultant in and get them to, give you the answer you're looking for, and that doesn't help.
Right. Yep.
The other thing we do is we break it down into, so we create what we call awareness, self-discovery. So we've learned over the years that even though we're experts in our field, coming in as a smarty pants is not the best way to change behaviors. So we use a process of what we call self-discovery. So you discover for yourself. We set you up on a process, we ask some questions, we might share some data, but ultimately you discover for yourself the impact that you're having on your teams. That self-discovery sits inside you. We always say that once you see something, you can't unsee it, and it's our job to help you see it and see the impact you're having on others.
Yeah.
As well, a lot of the time, the leaders that you're working with are in exactly the same difficult environment, where they're under high pressure, low capacity, they're fearful of their job security. They're in the same environment. They're just trying to survive and do their best.
Yeah, I can't imagine. Well, you gave so much rich information there. And people do not go into leadership roles wanting to be a crappy leader. They want to do their best. And so I would imagine that heart is there for everyone. And it is a lack of awareness. It is a lack of knowing the behaviors that are more aligned. And I love that, this whole self-discovery process, it makes me think about coaching, right? When you coach someone, you're really helping them discover the answers within them that they probably intuitively know, but they've been maybe turning off because of the environment. But what I think is really key here, maybe the biggest takeaway, is that before you are helping organizations really, with their transformation, with their change, you're fixing the foundation. You're setting up a foundation that is stable and in a good spot. And then you're like, okay, now we can talk about this. And I love that that's your approach. It's taking a look at the foundation, because I think there's a lot of change agents or organizations that want, third parties like a consultant to come in and give them what they think they need. But you're like, cool, I hear you. That's not what you need. It's not resilience training. It's something else.
And that's where the self-discovery comes in, because we believe there's absolutely no point fixing the effects. Because if you fix the effect, it's like being a hole in a pipe or a hole in a hose pipe. If you fix the effect, it'll just come out somewhere else instead. So we're about the root cause. There are probably 2 or 3 underlying root causes that really flow through most organizations. Once you know what those root causes are, you can go look for them. Then you can say, this is what's happening. we often go in to fix one thing, and we do fix that, but we identify the root cause and fix the root cause, which then has a positive benefit across a whole load of other things that were all impacted by that root cause. So
Yeah.
fix the root cause and not the effect. If I had to offer just one thing and say one place to look, if you know you really want to go look in one place, it's going to come down to trust. In pretty much everything, it's going to come down to trust. Now, there's a really interesting dynamic between trust and safety. And we've tried to underpin this a few times. We have a think tank called Change Exchange. We put it through the Change Exchange process a couple of times. And in the end, where we've got to is that they basically help each other. So if you trust more, you feel safer. If you feel safe, you trust more. And they're like, just like, what do you call it? Like a perfect circle that just keeps going up and up and up and up and up. You can't really have one without the other. They sort of create each other, but they sort of come together. It's like this most powerful thing. So when you look at most situations in most organizations, the underlying thing that doesn't sit there is trust. Psychological safety falls down. Now, we take a position. Psychological safety is an amazing thing if you can generate it in your organization. But I'm going to tell you that 98% of organizations on this planet, for-profit organizations, will never achieve psychological safety. However much you try, however much you read the books, however much you do whatever you're supposed to do in the books, you're never going to achieve it, because it's at odds with what your shareholders are looking for, which is basic profit returns. It's going to generate things like, and think about safety this way. Safety has a hierarchy within it, a little bit like the hierarchy of needs. You know, there's like a physical level, there's a financial level, there's some levels of safety before you get to this amazingly high level of psychological safety. Now, to get to that level is pretty hard, and most organizations fail somewhere in the lower levels. Now, research bases that Amy Edmondson uses, and you should read her book. It is amazing. It will really make you think about safety differently. When you look at the research bases that she uses, one of them is hospital consultants, which are, again, have very high longevity. They have a high level of job security. It's not the sort of job that you get fired from or get reorganized every 2 years or anything like that. And the other one at the time was Google with Project Oxygen. And in those days, Google had never, ever, ever threatened safety in their life. Way back in October 2023, I think it was, Google had their first round of redundancies. And they destroyed every tiny bit of psychological safety that organization had, that was that organization's superpower. If you speak to anybody who was involved at the time, they went from being emotionally committed as a Googler, somebody who felt that this was their family, felt stronger towards Google than they did their own family. They literally had this deep connection. The discretionary effort they put in for the good of Google was massive, and it was destroyed overnight. To get some profit out to shareholders, probably the wise idea that, you know, in the tech industry, they can't carry this bloated headcount anymore. But in doing it in the way they did it, which is a rational approach, they basically wiped out discretionary effort. And that discretionary effort is where your value really sits. That's where people go above and beyond to help out your organization. Now, most organizations are not prepared to put in place the stability and the safety at their lower level that you need for psychological safety to exist. Job security is not great. If you're in the US, you're underemployment at will. Even in Europe, security is not great. You know, most organizations reorganize every 2 or 3 years. And because of that, you're always asking yourself, am I next? Am I next?
Wow. And I think that is, I'm really glad that you're sharing this, because it is a reality that I think many of us are afraid to talk about, the fact that there is such a lack of psychological safety. And it is everything that you've described. And I also think the way that, maybe it's the leadership hierarchy even that is designed, the organizational structure contributes to the lack of psychological safety too. So not only is it a lack of job security, but it's how you get rewarded and promoted. I mean, that trust piece is so big. But not only can a layoff or a restructuring in the trust, but if you're competing with other people for the same roles or resources, that somebody you trust can be somebody you don't trust pretty quickly. So it's pretty fascinating that there's just so many layers to it, and the impact that it can have on, organizations' ability to innovate.
So the competition in the senior levels is massive. You can normally see in a corporate, one of the dynamics when they start to put people transversely, like sideways, because they have where for them to go. So the competition to get into the senior levels, the levels that pay well, the levels that have great equity, whatever, is fierce. And most organizations almost like have a cat eat cat, dog eat dog approach to that.
Mm-hmm.
Quite hard to get to that level and quite hard to manage at that level.
Mm-hmm.
Safety, we've been looking at safety now for 20 years because we were looking behind what motivates humans to do things differently at work. And you know, it's not the same. The classic sort of pro side sort of, you know, if you create some awareness, you're going to create some desire, almost like the dancing man theory.
Yeah.
Because typically you've got a context, you've got a boss to please, you've got some security that you're trying to establish, you're
Yep.
trying to keep yourself safe, and therefore you're more likely to do what your boss does. We've worked a lot in emerging markets, and I can tell you that the ethical choices we make as humans are more likely to be done based on what we need to do in our team. We call it a tribe needs and what our boss needs than what we have as our own personal ethics. We
That
often
makes sense.
that ethics in our working environment, and that's very clear when you see things like junior auditors. I think it was Ernst & Young got fined for their junior auditors because they were actually cheating on their audit exams, which I think is very
Got it.
so
Yeah.
they were cheating on your audit exams, or there was one recently they were cheating on their learning because they were doing 3 learning things at the same time. It's VW, you know, where they didn't want to tell their bosses that they couldn't fix the Californian safety emissions test for their diesel cars. So they basically fiddled it instead and basically made it only report, you know, run a certain way if it was in a location that had a testing thing. They got busted by students who were testing emissions on the road instead of a testing location and couldn't work out why they couldn't match the VW results they were getting in testing stations. They got busted by students. But because they didn't have the safety to be able to go to their boss and say, guys, we can't meet the California regulations. And instead of have a tough conversation with their boss, they chose to cheat instead.
Yeah. And I would imagine that in a different scenario or situation, their ethics, that's so hard because of the tribe mentality, the wanting to please the boss. I mean, so what, you know, in your experience, recognizing too, that most organizations are failing at that lower level, what are some small things that we could do as leaders that companies could start to think about and do differently that could just make an incremental impact, an incremental improvement to the psychological safety? Because I don't see this changing overnight. I see this being a very long conversation, but it has to start and continue. So what would you, you know, what do you think?
So I think when you there's a couple of things. It's no point things like putting a foosball table in the corner or anything like that. There's no point that has absolutely zero benefit to you at all. When you look back and say, how do I fix the root cause? The root cause for all of psychological safety is profit taking. It's profit taking from shareholders. When we go into an organization, we ask ourselves 2 questions. Number 1, follow the money. Number 2, who has the power? And the follow-up is who is ultimately benefiting from whatever this organization does and what's their needs. And if these are shareholders who want profits, who want double-digit growth year on, guess what? They are going to focus on taking profit out of the business, taking costs out. If they're not growing, they're going to be taking costs out. So trying to say we're not going to reshape the organization or make more efficient is not going to work any different because you're going to be forced into it in order to keep the expectation of your shareholders. The second one then is where's the power? Because some parts of the organization have the power to constrain growth, the power to constrain income, and those ones tend to have the power and tend to be protected. If you're outside of that region, you're probably going to be relatively unsafe. Now, as a leader, it comes down to how you choose to lead. Now, the biggest challenge for most leaders is number 1, capability. They just don't have the capability to do what they're doing because they've never been taught to how to lead ever. Leadership is so poorly badly taught. We actually have a side gig now in leadership development because we're specialists at how to lead change, and that's basically leadership 101. But leadership development for some pretty big organizations now where we teach their leaders. So leadership is number 1, which is the capability, but the second one is the capacity to lead and the capacity to do it. Now, the really great leaders, and this takes mental capacity, it takes a willingness to want to do something different, will protect their team from the drama that comes down from above. Now, you might be able to protect every job in your team, but you make sure your team feels valued, feels listened to, and feels included. So I should explain, in our day job, we also do our own research because we find academic research is often not relevant or is out of date. And when we
Right.
inspiration, and why would you follow a leader? Why would you want to do something differently? How can you game this situation where I want to give my discretionary effort, even in where the greater context around you means that you may not have the job security that you'd really like, but cause me still to follow a leader and make it great. So we teach emotional intelligence, obviously. So that's the filtering. So I need to be able to filter, which takes energy, because I have to take all of the crap that I'm getting from my leaders, all of the crap that's coming down and being put on my shoulders, and pause and not pass it through.
Yeah.
The crap stops with me. All right. I'm going to choose how I pass it through, and that takes energy. Most leaders don't give it the energy. The second thing then is the research we've done, and we keep asking, probably asked well over 1,000 people so far. And we always say to them, what did that leader do that inspired you? What did that leader do that made you want to go the extra mile? And 3 things have come out very, very, very clearly as the answer to this. The first one is they made me feel valued. I felt valued by them. Now, feeling valued is a very, very, very simple tactic. All right, a simple tactic. Give positive feedback. Don't just give it. Now, there's the work of Barbara Fredrickson. It gets used also in counseling, like couples counseling. Her advice is 3 positives for every negative. You need it in your brain anyway, because every time you have a negative thought or you get given negative feedback,
gravitate towards it. Yeah.
All of your amygdala hijack goes off, your body floods with really bad chemicals for defense that make it defensive. It's not good for you, not good for your health. And you need 3 positives. I think it was 2.7, so round up to 3. Positives of the dopamine, the serotonin, the oxytocin to basically reset that. So we always say you need to give at least 3 bits of positive specifics. So none of this like, good job, guys, high five. It's got to be specifics. It's got to be, hey, Jess, I really like the way you, and give it liberally and give it very, very, generously. Now, if you give generously to what you do like, the 2 things you're going to notice immediately is your team are going to start to do more of what you call out as being good.
Yeah.
The second thing is, because they feel valued by you, because they know that they feel valued and nurtured by you, when you do have to say, hey, John, could you try this for me instead? Or would you give this a go instead? They're more likely to listen in the context of, I know I'm already valued. If a child only ever got negative feedback, they pretty much shrink into a very small thing, a very small person who doesn't try anything new. It's the same logic. So number 1, as a leader, be generous with your positive feedback. Find things that you like in others and tell them. Make it a habit to say, hey, Fred, I really like the way you closed out that meeting. Hey, Bill, I really like the way you held the tension with Jim in stock control. So just literally make it normalize it, so it becomes such a normal thing to do that when you then need to sort of say, give a nudge feedback, it's just very normal. Second thing to do, listen. And it's about, the second thing people say is, I felt listened to, I felt heard. Again, a very important thing. Humans don't feel heard most of the time. Most leaders are in project mode. And if you as a leader find that you are hearing your voice in most of the conversation, you're probably getting it wrong. So
I agree with that. Yeah.
Others, because until you listen to them, you can't nudge them because they don't feel heard. They've got this unrequited need to be heard. So you have to listen, play back to, become good at actively listening, and then you can nudge. The third one is the thing that humans love most of all, is we hate to be excluded. Our groups are really, really, really important to us. It's why the naughty step is the worst thing for a 2-year-old. Really, really important that we feel included and we feel like we are part of the group. And the micro exclusions are one of the most powerful punishments you can give to anybody, is a micro exclusion. But people do it naturally without even realizing. So inclusion. So 3 things: help your people feel valued, give the feedback, time to listen, and hear them, and make them feel included.
Yeah. Wow. Those are great advice, great tips, all make sense. Yeah. And I think, whether you're leading a team through change or you're wanting to improve the psychological safety and the trust in your team, like, this is powerful. You mentioned children. I was like, I'm thinking about this with my own kids. Like, what did I, what feedback have I given my kids lately? And did I layer in enough positive feedback? So it's just a very powerful way of thinking. And it also emphasizes the responsibility. I don't know if we often, and I'll use the collective we for leaders, think about the fact that leadership is a responsibility, and it's not a, it certainly has it. It's not a position. It's not a title. It's a way of operating. And that really increases our responsibility to lead in the best way possible. So we have the least harm and the best, most, positive outcome with our team. You are a wealth of knowledge. You're brilliant. I have loved this conversation. And I know anyone who is listening or watching is going to learn and take notes and hopefully go implement what you're saying, because even though it's, the road may be long, it's one worth traveling. And what you just described is very accessible. There's nothing about it that isn't accessible. I'm guessing it's the consistency with which we apply those three things that you have learned through your research that really is what has the biggest impact. Is there anything else, Edwina, that you'd like to share with people who are tuning into the Change Leader Insights podcast to learn about the importance of having psychological safety, how to overcome toxic cultures, anything that we haven't talked about that you just want to hit home on or just reinforce even?
I think so the big things I would say generally is if you think you're working in a toxic culture, a very, very, very difficult environment for your own health and safety, for the safety of your own health, it will have a dramatically poor effect on you. And if you feel that you cannot change that environment, then you are better to leave that environment, because it's almost impossible to change the environment. So make a choice, about an overt choice about whether you stay with it or you leave. And that would be my guidance there.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
And you are operating in an environment, it doesn't feel great. It feels like a pretty crappy environment. You have agency. You have a lot of agency to do things. And you can use that agency. You can create a different environment. You don't have to pass that through to your team. Now, if you are judging your bosses as not being great, take a moment and just reflect that leaders, to your point, no leader gets up in the morning to come and be a really bad leader and to upset people. They do. And leaders are humans first. They're trying to survive in their culture as well. It doesn't excuse it, but recognize that everyone's just trying to survive in the environment.
Yeah, I have no doubt somebody needed to hear what you just said, giving themselves permission to leave, giving themselves permission to make the change, be the change they want to see, and also remembering that leaders are humans too. That's so important.
You can feel very diminished when you're working in a tough environment. You become like a very, very small part of yourself.
Yeah.
And the thing to recognize here is it's not you that is the small person. The environment is causing you to do that.
Yeah.
And if you your environment to one that is better for you, then you will flourish again and you will become the best of you. And
I love that.
Your environment to do that.
Oh, that's a really great way to end this, because I think that's a very positive, encouraging, hopeful message too. So thank you so much. I've loved this conversation. Where can people find you, find your resources? Do you want to share those links? And I'll put them in the show notes, of course.
We have a great website, irrationalchange.com. So go have a look at that. I'd like to say prolific on LinkedIn. I'm not as always prolific as I should be, but we do share a lot, and we share a lot of our thinking. So follow me, follow my partner, Nick Pike, also follow Irrational Change. If you want to come play and do some brainstorming with us, then we have a thing called Change Exchange, where we bring together some of the best change agents, and we basically solve problems like, how do you fix a toxic culture? What causes it? We basically solve that as a co-collaboration, collective brainstorming, and it's just the most amount of fun.
Yeah, and I have resources that came from that think tank, so it's definitely worth checking out and at least getting information, if not participating. So thank you for sharing your wisdom and insights and history of expertise in this area. I'm really grateful that we had this conversation today, and I have no doubt people tuning in will be grateful too. So thank you so much.